Hello and welcome to Media Musings. We have currently have Doc Fearsome in the chat, and hello to everyone else who might be watching in the future. Once again, welcome to Media Musings, where we usually take a piece of media and examine its themes and kind of just do a general discussion about it. But this week's topic is rather special, where we're talking about a larger concept, which we do on occasion. This week is we're discussing problematic media, and in that we're talking the plural of medium. We're not talking the news. So if
fake news,
yeah. So if
that's a stream all on its own.
Yeah. So if people came here thinking we're going to be talking about the fail and the scum and box, where you're going to be a bit sadly disappointed, but hopefully pleasantly surprised.
I have another name for that newspaper, but I'm a little reluctant to say what it is. So
yeah, I'm sure we all have a few that aren't.
I'll put it in the private.
Safe.
I'll put it on the daily on our
but
private chat, right?
And if you
yeah, don't say that out loud. You will immediately get pulled.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. And also, given what happened earlier, we're gonna do our best to avoid the certain words.
Ring, do you mind? Your stream, do you mind?
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't have to breathe it, so I don't mind.
Fair.
I have to go out of the room if I want to do that, so
yeah.
I'm lucky that way. But yeah, problematic media.
Yeah. So, at least the way I see it, there are two ways, in which media can be can be made problematic. If it's not problematic, if one where we kind of advance beyond the attitudes of the time and look back and see there's some problematic shit there. And then the other where the piece of media itself seems, is fine, and then the author or copyright holder loses
their goddamn mind.
Or in the instance of a certain rodent ruled mega corporation is just being a copyright devouring monster, and that's they'll produce good stuff, for instance, The Mandalorian was really good, but there's still a bit of a problem there just because of their business practices.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of problematic, I'm not going to read this out. Oh my gosh, please.
Is this...
Okay. Sorry, no, something totally unrelated that just rolled up my Twitter timeline. Ignore me.
Okay, yeah.
Right, okay, yeah. No, just something to do with, it's not media as such, it's history, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, problematic media.
You can share that with me privately, Hesse. I'll be interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've got to really define problematic. I think because I think that can be, to each of us, that could mean a different thing.
And also, there's always the instinct to say, oh, it makes me feel uncomfortable, so it's automatically problematic. But the thing is, there are pieces of media that are designed to get their point across by making you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Like,
So, perfect example of this. When I was, and I'm going to tell this anecdote because I've alluded to it once or twice on different stews, but never told it fully.
Yeah.
When I was in sixth form college in the UK, so that's 16 to 18 years old, I was studying English Lit. And at the time, part of English Lit was you had to read widely. You were expected to walk into the exam having read at least 100 books on various topics, novels and things, that you could potentially reference compared to the set text in the exam.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know what topic was going to come up, so you needed to have read that widely so you could cover all topics.
Yeah.
And one of the books that came up was James Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain. And I read this in, my second week of college, because I was literally going down the list and B for Baldwin. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
I read it. Now, the first 2 pages of that book, it's been a while, but that book is about a young man, a black young man, whose family wants him to be a pastor and he doesn't want to do it. And his father's a pastor and it's a family thing. And he doesn't want to do it. And literally the first page jumps out at you like a smack in the face with a fucking hot poker. That word. From the mouth of his father, a black man. And I went to my teacher and I said, this should not be on the reading list. You're going to make white students think this is appropriate to say. And do you know what she looked at me and she said? It's literature. If you don't want to be offended, take a different class.
Yeah.
Literature is designed to make you think. That's the entire point.
Well,
so while I appreciate certain things are completely unacceptable and should not be glorified, that doesn't mean we should be going out and burning books because we don't like the content of them or just roundly cancelling things.
Well, there was
everything has merit, even if it's only as a bad example.
I'll just say like similar sort of story to that. That one of the books I actually had to read at school, and there was just a big furore just because the F-bomb got used in this one time, but the F-bomb got used, and it was like, oh, you can't have that for kids. And it was the book A Kestrel for a Knave. If anyone's read that, which is an absolutely brilliant, it's a heartbreaking book, but it's a brilliant book. And also and I will say, as much as I love the film adaptation of it by Ken Loach, the book is so much better. But look, for raw, we had to read that at school, and just because of one time, the F word was in there.
Like we're not saying it 3 times an hour in the playground.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Or my my go-to example for a book that's designed to make you feel uncomfortable but isn't problematic
To Kill a Mockingbird
is Handmaid's Tale.
That too.
Especially seeing as how I first read it while I was super fundamentalist.
Your journey with that, obviously, for those who don't know, Ring is my husband. His journey with his reception of The Handmaid's Tale has been nothing short of amazing. I remember when we first met, you said you were still vaguely Christian. You hated it. You thought it was offensive. You thought it was wrong. And I'd recommended it to you as reading.
Yeah.
And then you read it again, and your entire
I read it again because I was trying to get the UK equivalent of a GED so I could go to college over there, and it was required reading in the course I was taking.
And then you came at it totally different.
Yeah, and actually, I do have a video on my channel. I'll probably put a comment with the link to it. But it was basically, it was the centerpiece of my first lit month where I actually did it on Banned Book Week. Basically covering my journey in regards to The Handmaid's Tale. So, after this, maybe give it a watch if you're interested.
Where is it? Lit month.
Yeah.
you remember what the name of the video was?
I don't know, but I can't recall it off the top of my head, but I think I do have a playlist for Lit Month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All
Let's
right.
see if I can find it.
I'm just whilst I'm on this, I'll let you know when we get into it. But I'm just looking up a list of banned books by country or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the classic thing in Britain, isn't it? It's always we say,
yeah,
ban something, ban a song, and it goes to number one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the tradition.
Or so for for a first example.
I mean, the United States is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when you go to this list, these are books that may have been banned nearer the time, but are not now. I mean, the Canterbury Tales at one time was banned under the Federal Anti-Obscenity Act of 1873. The Canterbury Tales was actually for being containing obscene, filthy, or inappropriate material. I don't think that still applies, but
do they know what the Canterbury Tales is even about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, Hissy. It is in the chat, but for those watching in the future, I'll drop it in the description or the comments.
Thanks, Hissy. But obviously, okay. Now this was a bad book that was banned in southern states mainly, but or what became the Confederate States of America. Uncle Tom's Cabin of 1852, a novel was banned. Because it, obviously kind of promoted abolitionist ideas and so on.
Since we are kind of going towards racism and such, I'll go ahead and mention one that's pretty much been constantly not what's the word when there's it starts with a C when there's a controversial controversial Huckleberry Finn.
Yes.
And I'm not of the opinion that we should ban books at all. I'm really not. Now, I think certain books, not necessarily Huck Finn, possibly Uncle Tom's Cabin, certain books should have a lower age guidance on them, like we do for films. Not necessarily a limit, but a guidance. And I say this because I was, the 8-year-old who was reading books for older teenagers, because I was an advanced reader. But there should be guidance on there of what you expect. If I'm reading, say, a horror novel story, there's a book I've got on my shelf called The Kilkenny Cat by Bill Ford. And this is a children's book. This is aimed at 7 to 10-year-olds. And it is, it's about sort of the history of Ireland and other things. But it's told through the allegory of cats, basically, cats and gang warfare. And there's one scene as a kid that traumatized me because it was literally a very gory, graphic depiction of cats being hung upside down and the blood collected and that just ew, horrible. That should have had a guidance warning on it for kids. Now, do I think it's a terrible book and therefore should be banned? Absolutely not. I would have any kid I knew at that age read that book, but I would tell them, if this gives you nightmares, if this upsets you, tell me so I can explain to you why it's there.
I mean,
and the thing is, people have forgotten how to be parents a lot of the time.
Yeah,
and that's an issue.
But anyways,
but yeah.
I was just saying, because I was looking at the ones in the United States. Now, obviously, you got to remember when we look at lists of the United States, sometimes it's individual states or whatever for whatever reason. But amazingly, a book that I've not found on this list, which a novel which I would call extremely problematic because of the themes of it and what it is promoting and the ideology it's promoting. The Turner Diaries is not on there. Now, obviously, I don't want to say, especially with the experience of my previous stream, We'll just say that the Turner Diaries promote some very, very right-wing ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the politest way I can possibly put that. Yeah, that when I look at a lot of the novels on here, which are generally looked as absolute classics, that have been banned in not necessarily all of the United States, but at least in some part of the United States at one or time or another. You look at Catch-22, the Grapes of Wrath, Lady Chatterley's Lover, as I mentioned, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Moll Flanders.
Yeah.
All books that are generally viewed as like literally, literature kind of classics in some way or another. However, and something like the Turner Diaries, which you could possibly make an argument around actually censoring.
But
I don't necessarily think it should be, but you could make an argument around it.
Though censorship is, basically it's. it is connected, but it is largely its own topic, and I'm probably going to do that for Banned Book Week.
Yeah.
But fun fact, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and a lot of the other Chronicles of Narnia books were have been banned in certain states or banned or challenged in certain states for anti-Christian themes. Yeah.
Sorry, remind me what book we're talking about?
The Chronicles of Narnia, the book series.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's got magic in it, and magic.
Do you hear that rumbling sound? That's the author rolling in his grave.
Yeah.
Well, the last novel to be banned in the UK was in 1991, and that was overturned a year later. Which is something called Lord Horror. I've never read it, but it was banned in England for obscenity. The one before that, and I do remember this news being a news story at the time, as it was an autobiography called Spycatcher, which was banned in the UK. Mainly because it was from a former MI5 guy who may have revealed a bit more than he should have done.
Yeah.
So you can maybe argue. Yeah, you can maybe argue that arguable. If it's putting someone at risk, still maybe he shouldn't have written it. I don't.
Can I point something out? If your security is so bad and so out of date that someone has time to write, edit, market, and publish an entire novel and it's still an issue, it's your security that's the problem.
Oh, and hello, Orla, and Amiga Nuts, and Tony Designs.
Hi, guys.
But so there is one bit of something actually problematic in The Last Battle, actually, since we were kind of mentioning Narnia. That is a bit misogynist. It's essentially a throwaway line where basically it turns out the reason Susan doesn't get to go to Narnia Heaven is because she got into wearing makeup. So that's
are we on the policing women and our right to exist bit now?
Yeah.
Now I can start talking about fandom police.
Yeah. That's an example of what I kind of mean by problematic, racist, sexist, misogynist, etc. Or in the case of the Empire of the Mouse, just monopolistic and evil.
Yeah. I mean, there are various things that are racist. I've been in discussion over the last couple of days with someone over whether you should, when you're writing fan fiction, if you write fan fiction that includes Tolkien-esque orcs, whether you should tag it as racist. No, because if you've tagged it as orcs, it's kind of implied. If people don't know what an orc is, they can Google it, and you might not actually be buying into the racist tropes. You might be criticizing them.
Yeah.
You know, and that this is the thing. I appreciate we're in a very difficult time, and there's a lot of strong feeling on both sides, including with me. But do you know what? Right? And I have major issues with this. We cannot allow ourselves to just start erasing everything we disagree with. Now, there are certain things I will absolutely say should not be the way they are. I am not going to sit here and do anything but cheer loudly and ask when they're doing the next one when I see videos of people throwing slave owners in the river.
Yeah.
And statues of slave owners in the river. You know, they don't. If they're slave owners, they don't have to be made of brass before you throw them in the river. That's my shout. But do you know what? Things like that. It depends how the text approaches it. If I'm going to write the stereotypical orc, which is, let's be honest, shorthand for the worst racist stereotype of what a black man is. If I'm going to do that uncritically, then that should be tagged as racist. If I'm going to sit there, though, and explore this character's backstory, themes, archetype, responses to things, that's called actually using critical thinking.
Yeah.
And there is a danger going too far in that direction.
Sorry, Hissy.
Yeah.
I don't think in all texts that orcs are intended to portray like bad stereotypes of black people. It does highly depend on the author who wrote the book.
Or just as an example.
Or
no, it's a good example, but
and
I'm pretty sure Tolkien didn't mean that when he was writing his stuff.
Yeah, am I racist for rolling up an orc character if I play D&D? No, I'm not.
No. and also there's there's a difference between playing up and writing up and playing into racist stereotypes and like lifting from actual history when you're portraying a society in a fictional setting.
I'm sorry, if you write me a story about ancient Rome and there aren't slaves in it and it's not a generally accepted fact of that society, you haven't written a historical drama, you've written a fantasy. Yeah.
But in regards to orcs, like if I were to write up if I were to make a campaign that featured orcs as a threat, I largely see them more as like steppe raiders. Think the Huns, the Turks, the Mongols.
Those are all vaguely racist, though, the way they've been presented. But, so I can kind of see what you're getting at, but yeah.
Yeah, but in the fact that they kind of do their own thing. Eventually there's a charismatic leader that decides to go wreck shop somewhere.
You can say that about any race, to be fair. You can say that about so.
Yeah. But the mounted archers sweeping in from nowhere, wrecking shop on an unprepared, civilization that gotten a bit too uppity.
I mean, again, if they were all orcs and they were only doing it because they were orcs, I'd have an issue with it. If they're doing it because there's other socio-political context within your game and your plot, that's a different kettle of fish. And this is what I mean by context and nuance.
Yeah. Or, and in my mind, there's a spectrum in regards to how problematic something is.
Yeah.
Like for instance, so kind of on the slightly lower end, but maybe approaching the middle. Like if we're gonna say 1 to 10, and 10 is a certain famous work written by a certain infamous leader of a nation,
which gave a certain perspective on the way they believed life should be.
Yeah.
That one.
MK.
Someone's holiday resort.
But for instance, I'd say I'd put like Sweet Home Alabama at like maybe a 5. Because in the first verse, like half of the first verse is essentially dissing Neil Young for writing Southern Man, which was essentially a protest song for civil rights.
I just wanted to say something, obviously about race, racist things within media. Now, obviously, okay, I won't get into the issues that we had today because, but people will know. Usually, as a lead into this show, Hissy and I have been for the last couple of months or so been going through the Asterix comics. Now, we had an issue today which I haven't quite figured out because YouTube hasn't notified me what the problem is, but that, however, we've had to address some things within those books over the last few weeks, which are very uncomfortable reading. I mean, quite clearly, very, very racist depictions of black people exist in those books, and it's one of those things that we've had to sit there and, yes, I think we've had to give context to it, but that's not now, context is not excusing it in any shape or form.
You can give context without glorifying it, and you can give context so that when you condemn it, your condemnation has context.
Yes.
Also,
otherwise you're just shouting into the wind.
Also, I'm very much
that sounds like Answers My Friends, doesn't it?
Yeah,
shouting in the wind.
I'm also very much of the opinion that you should take that like 10-minute disclaimer that you did for, I think it was Asterix and the Gladiator.
Yeah.
Make it its, basically cut that out, or cut that clip, make it its own video, and then just point to that disclaimer.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good idea.
Actually, Jeff, I'll redo your intro and write me a disclaimer you want. I'll put it up as text and play a little bit more music at the end of the intro as your disclaimer. Cool. So write a disclaimer you want, and I'll add it to your intro. That way, whenever you play your intro, it's automatically on there as a disclaimer.
Okay. And you could do that for us, Jen.
Well, you write it and send it to me, and I'll put it in it. So
okay.
So are we kind of still?
But
are we fine with staying on stereotypes a little bit longer? Because Orla did bring up a Netflix series that starred Will Smith.
Oh, which one would that be?
The fantasy and modern day that
Bright.
Bright. Okay, well, yeah, it wasn't a series; it was a movie. But
I've seen it.
I haven't seen it.
It's not that good.
I liked it.
Well,
I know it was ridiculous tropes.
I know we
I quite like the story,
but I wanted to actually, because I didn't quite finish what I wanted to say on that particular thing with the things with Hissy and I have been reviewing. Now, yes, there are some inexcusably racist depictions of some minority groups in those books. However, does that necessarily mean every single thing in those books should be thrown out as a result of that? Absolutely not, because we found a lot of good humor and a lot of good and we found it a very good way even to talk about the actual history of the period, even if it's sometimes correcting some of the things they got wrong.
Yeah.
And again, it's that there's no such thing as a worthless piece of media, only a bad example.
Yeah, and
you can learn as much from a bad example from a good one.
Yeah. I mean, we and we will, it's one of those things we've kind of we had to, and there was if you actually go back to that, maybe whenever we get around to clipping that particular clip you were on about Ring, or we'll do the same thing. That there was a good link to, and I think it was an article in the New York Times that we found on this about explaining certain caricatures from comics at that time period, and because it was not exclusive to Asterix. I mean, Tintin, for example, is got a lot of issues, and explaining the kind of context of that, but maybe a little bit of the history, kind of history of racism in Europe. That you have to understand goes with those sort of depictions, and again, that is not excusing racism. Contextualization and excusing it is two different things, and I like to think what myself and history did not do at any point, that is excuse it.
Yeah,
absolutely not. No. Can I put my history lecturer hat on for a second?
Sure.
Cool. There's this great thing that likes to roll around the internet, and people don't have a clue what it means. They say those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. What that doesn't mean is that you have to leave up monuments to slave traders, that you have to teach history uncritically, that you have to glorify every aspect of history, or that historical persons have to be squeaky clean angels in white before they can be examples. What that means is that in order to fully understand history, society, people, you have to take the good with the bad and assess it critically.
Yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
And the whole point of doing it critically is that you say, right, this society was amazing because X, Y, Z. This society was also garbage because A, B, C. Therefore, this society was just like every other human society in history. It was human.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And now a good follow-up on that, and I will just say this on a context of the history, because recently there's been a massive, I wouldn't even call it debate, but argument in the UK over the legacy of Winston Churchill as a figure in our history. And you have to you definitely got to look at the real history and distinguish between the kind of myth and the man. And yes, we should not discount the fact that this was the man who led us through World War II. We shouldn't.
Jeff, maybe try gesturing a little bit.
Yeah.
However, and I got to say this: I'm sorry if you're going to look at history honestly, with regards to that particular person, there is no two ways about it. Even by the standards of his own time, the man was a racist, and there is no getting away from that.
I'm so glad that's the route you took.
Yeah,
I was getting ready to just be like,
what I'm saying is we should not wipe the man from like the history of our nation. However, we've got to be a little bit more honest, and I think this is just that. And again, this is even getting off topic of what we're really supposed to be talking about here, but that's just something, a historical figure to me that I think people are way too more willing to buy into the myth of the man rather than actually looking at the person.
When you finish, Jeff, as with all things, whether it's a book, a film, a person, an artifact, a statue, a picture, whatever it is, all things are a product of their situation.
Yeah,
I agree.
You cannot take things out of their context. Now, if those things are massively out of line with their context, i.e. Churchill the raving racist, okay, that should be criticised and that should be looked at.
Yeah, like
it shouldn't be swept under the rug.
Like, for instance, in a lot of 19th century novels, there is, the casual Victorian racism. And I'd say in certain of Edgar Rice Burroughs' books, he at least approaches the line, if not steps past it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a cancel culture thing brought out by a couple of people, and I challenged last year, where they were trying to have Isaac Newton erased from science books.
Why?
Because he was a sexist and a racist when he was alive. And I'm like,
did they know what time he was living in?
Yeah.
Well, regardless of that,
like
their biggest argument was like, what, his stuff doesn't matter anymore because we've got Einstein. And go, even if it didn't matter, which isn't true, you don't get rid of the history of how things developed. That is just crazy. You can talk about how the bad ideas that the man had without cancel culturing him, because that's ridiculous.
And you could you could, in the same breath as you mentioned him, being, by our standards, sexist and racist, you could also mention that, he also he also practiced alchemy.
Yeah. Making this statement got me blocked by a philosophy professor.
Yeah. Well, I would just say, especially when you just mentioned philosophy and whatever. I mean, there's it's very difficult in sense like people who want to erase someone like Plato or Aristotle from history, because Aristotle said some things that there's no two ways about it in our conscience we would view is completely sexist, or Plato, some of the stuff he said was bigoted or whatever.
Has anyone here read The Republic?
A long time ago. I got to admit my knowledge of it is a bit sketchy, but
that is triggering. That is like that. That upset me reading it, because it was what he was describing, that he was claiming was this perfect utopia, was essentially a totalitarian regime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if you're someone who is deeply affected by those issues, that's going to trigger you. That doesn't mean that we should destroy every copy of The Republic.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
It has historical value, if only as a war.
I will always use the I think because there was something Plato said about I can't quite remember the exact quote, but something about the lower classes, and he referred to them as contemptible bastards, I believe was the way he referred to them. And I always will, when people put that on to me, saying, I always quote the comedian Mark Steele on this, who I think said this, who I think put this very brilliantly in the form of a joke, and says, well, you got to understand that was very advanced for the time, because there wouldn't be another Greek who'd say anything like that until Prince Philip came along.
But so
I knew that to get here, chuckle out.
So is everybody so are we fairly through with discussing products of their time? Do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we've covered that.
Okay, so because I've got a pretty smooth segue from that to talking about authors and copyright holders who themselves are problematic. And we're
like the House of Mouse.
Wait, you're gonna go from Plato?
Are you gonna go?
Okay.
Are you gonna go? Are we gonna go into it? Because you said, can I just ask a question in advance? Are we gonna go into a certain author of books about wizards at all?
Probably.
Okay, because I know Jen will have some stuff to say on this.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to let Hissy have her say first.
So first, we're going to make a very smooth, very brief transition because this particular author, I could very well just base a stream off of by himself. Well, so we're gonna briefly discuss Robert Heinlein because when I think of problematic authors, he is my go-to.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly.
Yeah, I very much have a love-hate relationship with Heinlein.
I actually don't like any of his work, so
I'm not keen. But the one thing I have to say, this is something that is systematic within science fiction.
Yeah.
Especially early
I've got hands up. I don't think I've read any of his work. So,
Stranger in a Strange Land,
Starship Troopers.
Oh,
Starship Troopers.
I know. I've heard some of the criticism. I've never read Starship Troopers. I've got to admit.
Yeah,
I've seen the movie.
I didn't pay. I saw the movie like 20 years ago and didn't pay that much attention to it at the time. I didn't think it was that good, honestly.
It's not. It's pure propaganda.
I get the idea that there was some proto-fascistic kind of ideas behind it. I mean, similar with like, and as people know, I look at a lot of comic books, but as much as I enjoy some of the man's work, some of Frank Miller's blooming stuff, it's
but
it's cringeworthy to me. But
Tony. Like I said, that's why I'm using Heinlein as a transition, because a lot of his like political stuff is very much product of its time. Like Starship Troopers is really fashy. But there is some stuff that is just straight up Heinlein being Heinlein. Like, for instance, how Stranger in a Strange Land turns out, like, that last half of Stranger in the Strange Land is about setting up a sex cult.
I'm going to say something.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that this is a very general comment.
Yeah.
Hence, I am preempting it. But Stranger in a Strange Land, to me, reads a lot. It's kind of like the same intentions, I presume, were behind the Twilight series.
Yeah.
It's one person's very repressed, and they've gone and they've written their ultimate taboo fantasy, and it's made it big. That's all that's happened.
I'd actually say possibly the more appropriate example in regards to Heinlein would be Door into Summer, where the happy ending of the protagonist is he can now marry his niece, because the age gap has been closed because of cryogenic shenanigans.
Yeah, that's closer, but it's still weird.
Yeah.
Now I appreciate that there are various ways you can take certain books, but if your book's happy ending is that something that is illegal, immoral for its time, or is just downright, there's never going to be a time when that's accepted.
Yeah.
That's an issue.
Again,
because
I want to. I guess it kind of also is again, with endings or whatever, or storylines, again, there's always a contextual element.
Yeah.
If it's a thing of like a dystopian, dystopian kind of society triumphing, like, I mean, let's go back to something like 1984.
Yeah. Hold on.
That's not a happy ending, though.
Yeah, there is something in the chat that I do want to address.
Power dynamics.
Yeah. Doorway. Yeah. But the thing is, she was just as good as his niece, and he had a creepy crush on her. And then the age gap was closed because of cryogenic suspension, and then they got married, and that was the happy ending.
So they weren't actually genetic sibling. They weren't actually genetically related, though.
Yeah, but it's still problem.
It's creepy, but it's not illegal.
It's still creepy.
Yeah, I'll grant you that it's creepy, but it's not illegal.
Yeah,
but like 1984. It wasn't a happy ending. I mean, effectively, the bad people won in that, and a society that was awful triumphed in that book, but that wasn't really glorified in any way, in the way that was written.
I don't think it matters.
But however, whereas something like and I brought this thing up earlier, the Turner Diaries, that is written in the sense of where people who started, quite frankly, I don't quite know how to put this.
It was written by a leader of white supremacy.
Yes, and it was. Let's just put it. Let's put it bluntly. The hero of this is a guy who started a race war and is being remembered from this narrative of the story as a hero of this race war.
You might want to be careful with your hand gestures.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to do the whole. Yeah, okay, I get that, but that was portrayed where the characters that did that were heroes. The way that was portrayed. Now that's problematic to me. I mean, it's a bloody awful book anyway. But that's you see the sort of context of where you can have a certain society or something triumph, but it depends on the way the story is being told. Like 1984, an awful society triumphed at the end of that, but that was not supposed to be a good ending. It was never intended that way. Turner Diaries, for example, an awful society triumphed, and that was a happy ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you read 1984 and it doesn't depress you, you didn't understand it. You need to read it again. I mean, I don't understand how we've managed to get nearly 50 minutes into a stream on problematic literature and no one's mentioned Lolita yet.
Yeah.
Actually, funny enough, that was on the old list of banned books. Actually,
I'll bet it was. I read Lolita when I was 11.
Yeah,
that was banned in the United Kingdom at one in the 1950s for obscenity.
Yeah, that was in the sixth form section of my school library, and they wouldn't let me take it out, so I used to go on my lunch breaks and read it. And you know what? They should have been more careful. They should not have let me read that at that age. That freaked me the hell out.
Interestingly, never banned anywhere in the United States. Interestingly.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
You'd think that'd be the first place.
Yeah. I'll give you some lists. I'll give you a list of some banned books in the United States. Now, I mentioned Lord Horror, Spycatcher, Lolita, The Well of Loneliness, Boy, Lady Chatterley's Lover, Ulysses by James Joyce. That was banned in the UK.
What the hell?
For what?
Yeah.
What the hell is in the UK? Ulysses was banned.
Yes, from 1922 to 1936, Ulysses was banned.
There was a poster about it in my year 9 English classroom.
despised and rejected.
It's ridiculous.
And literally, most of the bands, all but two of them, were banned in the 20th century. The two that weren't was, I can't remember. It's a book by John Milton, Aeropagliotica. I've never read that. I'm sorry. Political Reasons. And 1791, Thomas Paine's Rights of Man. Those were the only two books that we have on record that were banned in the United Kingdom. I'm sure there were others, but we have recorded banned in the United Kingdom until 1918, and the other eight of those 10 books were banned in the 20th century, which says a bit. I can almost understand why Thomas Paine was banned at the time.
Yeah, given what he was writing about.
Yeah.
Given that, even just to give an example, I've literally just typed it into Google to refresh my memory. Rights of Man, a book by Thomas Paine, including 31 articles, posits, and popular political revolution is permissible when a government does not safeguard the natural rights of its people. Yeah. I can understand why governments maybe didn't want that floating around.
Yeah.
Especially in the early 20th century when things were hot.
But yeah, I mean, it's really weird though, that when you look at these things, even you look at banned books in the United States, okay, you've got novels or whatever that are a lot of novels, and there's maybe one that's sort of educative theory you could ask that aren't but that was banned. Mainly, even it's really weird when you think about it, especially with some of the United States heroes. There's not a lot US history. There's not a lot that was banned for political reasons. Well, I mean, I'm actually somewhat surprised not to see, like, when I look at the United States list of banned books, not to see Karl Marx or Lenin on there. To be honest,
yeah, it's in the U.S. it's mostly for religious reasons, and even if actually no, there is one book that I know of that was locally banned for political reasons. The Lorax by Dr. Seuss.
Really? That was what?
It was banned. Yeah, it was banned in in a town in like Northern California because it criminalized the logging industry.
Yeah, that makes sense because they're right next to Oregon, and the logging industry is basically their entire.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Economy, yeah.
But yeah, in the U.S., it's mostly for religious reasons, and even if the listed reason isn't, it's usually because the person who complains to make it challenged finds something objectionable, but the real reason they're complaining is usually religious. Like for instance, The Handmaid's Tale is mostly for like obscenity and sex and stuff, but it's the reason they're doing it is because of the religious objections.
The thing is, obscenity in media is what media is.
Yeah.
You can go back several thousand years, and some of the earliest media we've got, frigging images on early settlements and stuff, they're obscene. I mean, there was one thing, a couple of years back, the Channel 5 or Channel 4, Channel 5 aired a documentary starring Bettany Hughes about Pompeii.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't know about this, Pompeii has a very well preserved Roman era, 1st century brothel.
Yeah.
And you walk into this building and it's so well preserved from the volcanic eruption, you can still see the paintings on the walls.
Yeah.
And they're very clear and it's very obvious what they are. Now it's a brothel. What are you expecting?
Yeah.
You're not expecting puppy dogs and rainbows, are you?
No,
okay.
never.
Very much a case of dead dove do not eat.
Yeah.
She walks into this brothel. Now, in Pompeii, on the roads also, there are phallic carvings that point the way to the brothel. We're talking about a society where people were not necessarily literate, and follow the point, follow it where it's going.
The staff will show you the way.
Yeah. Now, when you get there, pictures and it almost reads like a modern takeout menu. I want that, and that. Here's my money.
Yeah.
Kind of. You can imagine that's how they might have used it, or it might have just been decorative. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it was there, and Channel 5, after the 9 o'clock watershed, blurred these pictures out on camera. I got so offended by this. I've been to Pompeii and been into that brothel. I knew exactly which picture they were blurring out. I shared an uncensored version of it on Twitter, and no one said a word. Because at the end of the day, there is a difference between, I'm sorry, it's after 9 o'clock, it's about Pompeii, and you preempted it by saying you were going into the brothel. Dead dove do not eat. Seriously, how many more warnings do you want?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Talking about obscenity, and this is, a huge tangent. But I'm gonna make this point, and then we're gonna try and get back on track. There are piss jokes in Macbeth.
Shakespeare was one of the lowbrow writers of the era. Shakespeare was not this big highbrow writer.
Yeah.
Shakespeare was writing for the common man. He was his era's equivalent, maybe, of some of the more lowbrow Monty Python stuff, of probably closer to, he wasn't satirical enough to be compared to South Park, but that's the level of comedy we're talking about. It wasn't designed to be all high and mighty. It really wasn't.
Drink produces 3 things, good sir: sleep, nose painting, and urine.
Exactly.
Nose painting.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. But this is what I mean. And no one's saying we should cancel Shakespeare because of his depiction of Caliban. Let's just put that out there.
Or The Merchant of Venice, or The Taming of the Shrew. But we've moved past things that are products of their time.
Yeah. Now, if Shakespeare had come out 10 years after writing any of those and said, and there'd been a massive growth in what people believed, and things had suddenly become a lot more liberal and a lot broader, and he was saying, actually, no, I still stand by those depictions, and I don't think there's an issue with them, and I believe something that was normal 30 years ago, then we'd be having an issue, because that's an issue with the author.
Yeah, you've got to have it in context of the time it's in. But you can still look at that context of the time and go, well, that's still wrong for us, but you shouldn't. Cancel culture is just stupid. I mean, to get onto the thing that we're going to get onto, no one should be saying, I'm
trying to push it back.
But we're an hour in.
Time to address the sorting hat wearing elephant in the room.
I would not advocate for the cancellation of J.K. Rowling. I don't agree with people burning her books because of what she's done over the last couple of years. If you don't want her books anymore, go donate them to a charity, and they can sell them then to other kids who want to read those books.
And she won't see a
money
cent
going
of it.
to J.K. anymore. She doesn't get a cent of it. Do the right thing, and if you want to deplatform her because of her opinions, don't get rid of the books by doing it. Just make it so she doesn't make any money off them.
Yeah.
That's the best way.
But let's be honest, she's only opened a trap because she's running out of money anyway.
Yeah, she wants to make herself relevant.
Well, funny thing is, and you can correct me, please, if you find anything I'm about to say after I finish saying it wrong.
Don't worry, we will.
Tell me I've put my foot in my mouth before my gag reflex, kicks in, please.
Yeah. Don't worry. Go.
Yeah. But the way I kind of see it is J.K. Rowling essentially just wrote her, with her tweets, essentially just alienated herself from what audience she had in the U.S.
She alienated herself from the entire world.
Well, okay, but
well, no, not the entire world, but
well,
a lot of people. Yes.
So my point is, like it would seem that a lot of people who would agree with what she's been putting out are conservative, right? Would that be a fair assessment?
That would be a fair assessment.
In the U.S., the largely conservative, groups already hate her guts for writing Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you see, it's not what it's the enemy of. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
No, like, so you've got the people who don't like her anymore because of what she's been tweeting in the U.S., and then you've got the people who were burning her books for being witchcraft.
Yeah, except that those people are now defending her. People attached to the Heritage Foundation are putting her up as an icon of what's good because she's speaking on the stuff that they wanted to speak on.
She's contradicting herself.
Yeah.
Coming at this, I'm not trans. I apologize for talking over. I'm not trans. She's contradicting herself. Within her own books, she has contradicted her own point of view on what gender and sex is. She's done that. There is literal evidence. And by all means, go and read this. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Chapter 7, The Seven Potters. I think it's Chapter 7. I want to say it's Chapter 7. The Seven Potters, it's called. Chapter 4. She reads, Harry, your eyesight really is awful, said Hermione as she put on glasses. This is after Hermione's drunk Polyjuice potion that makes her physically identical to Harry, including his genitals, and yet Rowling still uses the female pronoun for Hermione.
Yep.
Because Hermione's
and you maintain your own brain, so you
change.
Still identify as yourself.
Exactly, because Hermione's identity did not change when she took the Polyjuice potion. She is who she is, regardless of what her body looks like.
And her characters were upset about those changes to their bodies for the ones who took the Polyjuice and had the physical change to be the other sex.
Exactly. Fred and George passed the comment that Harry was too scrawny. Fleur said to Bill, "Oh, don't look at me, I'm ugly now." Because she's female and very much her and a lot of her character is her looks and how she values her looks because she's part Vila. So when Rowling comes at people and says, "Oh, you are your genitals," go whistle. You've already contradicted yourself, love.
Yeah.
And you put it in writing.
And I'm sorry, her gaslight. Look, I'm very sorry for her for the abuse that she had, but you being abused is not a reason to abuse other people. That does not give you a free ticket to be a prick or a bitch or whatever you're fucking being, because I'm not saying your abuse is your problem, but how you deal with your abuse is your problem. And taking it out, the fact that you were abused, then taking that out on other people is making you an abuser.
Okay. I'm going to be very careful.
Say something on that.
Yeah.
Can I say something on that? Because I think Jen and I had this conversation the other day. I think we're kind of in agreement on this, that I think it's terrible that if she's been a victim of sexual or domestic abuse, that is absolutely fucking terrible. Something we all will stand against. But I agree with Jen that does not in any way give her a free pass to use that in some kind of argument for the stuff she's put out over the last couple of years. That absolutely does not. And I would even go as far, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, saying that I actually think that's a little bit insulting to people who have been victims of sexual or domestic abuse.
Thank you.
That.
Yeah.
And that's my thoughts on J.K. Rowling's recent statements. However, I think maybe to get into what I think could be a more larger topic with problematic media, and I understand obviously cancel culture, and that has been discussed. By doing that, are we in a problem where we're just masking the problem rather than confronting it on a lot of these issues? That would be my question.
You make a fair point, and I'm seriously considering my words as they come out of my mouth right now.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You make a fair point that we can and should confront these issues. I think the line is drawn whereby those of us who should confront these issues and these opinions are not necessarily those who are targeted by them. Because those who are targeted by them, quite frankly, have enough on their plate. And those of us who are not necessarily primarily affected by them, for example, I'm not trans, I'm not primarily affected by what she said. However, we have a duty as decent human beings to say something, to make our voices heard. Because she has got a massive platform.
Yes.
She has chosen to use that platform to punch way down. And we have a duty to stand up and say, no, this is not acceptable.
Yeah.
However,
if only
in doing
so the
that,
people she's doing that see that we are with them. However, I am now going to pass over to Jen because I want to hear her point on that.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to go in a position that I actually think you probably would have gone if I hadn't started saying anything. And that is, it is always good when you're an ally to a group to speak up for that group. But be careful when you speak up that you're not speaking over that group. Their voices come first and yours as an ally come second. And you shouldn't ever be offended by that.
This is why I've been sometimes a little reluctant to jump in on some issues recently as a kind of cis white male. I have been a little bit reluctant to jump in on some of those issues. And yeah, I feel a lot of the time it's, I can offer support, but I cannot speak on behalf of people who have faced the most awful kind of oppression, and it's not my place to tell people whether it be on issues of race, sex, gender, sexual orientation, whatever it may be. I don't think it's my place to say how people in those positions should feel over these issues, and this is why quite often I'm very reluctant to jump in on some of these, even though I have my opinions. All I feel I can do is give a supporting voice as much as I can. To people that are being victimized, I feel that's the best I can really offer, in my humble opinion. But
I absolutely, you saw me.
Yeah.
Perfect. Love that response.
Yeah, it was
Exactly.
perfect.
I thought you were telling me to be quiet. Hissy, I actually thought you were telling me to be quiet. But
no, seriously, absolute respect for that point of view. Everyone has their own experiences that they can bring to it, their own learning that they can bring to it. However, if you are not in the primary group that is being affected by a particular thing, you do not get to talk over that group and claim you speak for them. You do not get to claim that you know more about this issue than that group. Because I don't care how many books you've read, films you've seen, documentaries you've watched, people you've spoken to, you do not know what it is like to walk in their shoes. You can guess and you can have empathy. But if you think you know what it's like to walk in their shoes, you're wrong. I don't know what it's like to be a trans person. I don't know what it's like to be a man. I don't know what it's like to be African American. I don't know these things. However, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to stand up in defense of these groups when the situation calls for it. Maybe not men, you know, you know what I mean, you know, but at the same time, that also means that you don't have to stay silent on it. A lot of things I do, if there's an issue that I'm not directly part of, I retweet people who are in that community and what they're saying. I share what they're saying because that's putting their voices out there. And my retweet is my implicit agreement and my attempting to get their voice out there. That's how I show that I'm with them. So, you know, it's one of those things where you do have to be careful, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know what it is to battle doctors because they're, you know, that they're transphobic. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what it is to, you know, be African American and not want to, you know, walk down the streets in America after a certain time, or if there's people in uniform. I don't know. And I mean, I was scared in America because I was pegged. A lot of people pegged me for Muslim in America 5 years ago, but I lived that for what, 3 weeks. These people have lived it their entire lives. Not my place to talk over them.
And yeah, and I think you know, and again, it's very easy for us, someone in my position, to sit there and perhaps see, when you see some of the reaction, especially with the current situation of people that have reacted in quite extreme ways or whatever, it's very easy for someone like me to sort of say, well, I agree with their position, but I don't agree with the way they're going about it. Very easy fucking thing to say. However, when you've lived that your entire life and you've been on the end of that, I'm going to say this: when these antagonisms explode, whether it be on issues of race, gender, sex, or even class, they don't always manifest themselves in a kind of pure way. Like you know, you've got this. People got this very idealized way of how people should fight back against the system. Whatever. It doesn't. In reality, it doesn't manifest itself that way. And so I think you know we do need to have a bit of nuance on that situation. Because it's very easy to say, oh, people go out and you know, riot in their communities, or you know, hurting themselves, blah blah blah. It's very easy for someone like me to sit there in a position like that and say that. However, those antagonisms don't always come forward in what we would call a pure, or you know, pure idyllic view.
A lot of it is, has anyone seen the meme going round of the triangle, and there's a line about 2/3 of the way above it, and the top half is avert racism, and it's obvious things. Then below that, it's all the things that are insidious, and they just bite, and they're microaggressions, and they build up and build up and build up. And if you are subjected to those things long enough, without ever having been the victim of any of the things at the top of that triangle, eventually you'll snap. Eventually you will snap, because those things are what cause what's at the top of the triangle. They are the foundations of it. They are what make it push that line higher and higher up and make things more and more acceptable when they shouldn't be.
You know, it's like, you know, it's like blaming an explosion for happening instead of looking at, you know, instead of finding the person who packed in the powder and then lit the fuse.
Exactly.
It's an interesting thing of all the forms of bigotry that you have is the tropes that are used to push bigotry in any field tend to be the same. So the experience for anyone who's in a class that's oppressed for some reason, or a group that's oppressed for some reason. I just whacked my microphone. Damn it! You talk about it, like if I talk to Hissy about the oppression stuff that trans people get, and she talks about what people of color get as oppression, we are going to find so much common ground because it's the same crap that gets dumped on you. It's done in a slightly different way to tone in with the type of prejudice it is, but it's the same things. That's why you hear the same tropes repeated. The tropes that happen, let's go with a simple one for that trans people cop, the bathroom thing. You can go back and find that in race when you had segregation. Mm-hmm. And then you move forward and it happened to the gays in the bathrooms.
Yeah.
And then it's the trans in the bathroom. And it's the same fucking argument right the way back, all the way forwards.
Yeah, there's that great... I can't remember who drew the cartoon. And it's a picture of a couple. Oh, it's a picture of a man. And he's saying, you know, they told us, son, that our love was illegal, immoral, wrong, dirty, all the rest of it. And then that's what they told us that. And then the next panel is him saying they were wrong and they're wrong now too. And the thing is, the guy saying that is a man in an interracial marriage. And he's saying that to what is quite clearly depicted as his gay son with his boyfriend.
Yeah.
And that is what that is indicating. The arguments get recycled, but the bigotry is the same, regardless of who it's aimed at.
And it doesn't matter. And these people go, well, and then you get people who get upset. Like if you're arguing on a trans thing, you might bring that up and say, the arguments you're making are the exact same arguments that people made 40 years ago to black people in the US during segregation. And we're like, and people go, oh, that's racist for you to say that. No, it's not. What it is it's pointing out that you guys are making exactly the same arguments and it's the same bigotry. You've just shifted your target for that bigotry.
Exactly.
But I guess the thing is, it's when it comes to, especially lots of problematic media, is again how we confront those issues. I don't know necessarily. I've got mixed views on this, on whether cancelling or no platforming is the right way forward. And
the problem with all those ideas,
I do think there's no blanket statement on this. And I've got to get this out. Like for example, it's like somebody. I'm trying to think. I don't know how to phrase this actually, because I obviously what happened to my stream earlier. I'm trying to think how to phrase this, but let's just say, someone who, shall we say, was a denier of the greatest crime in human history wanted to have a debate with me on my channel, and I would be like, I am not going to platform such a debate because I do not. There's nothing to discuss there.
Yeah,
there is absolutely nothing to discuss there.
There is fact and there is lies.
There is fact. There's like it is not. That is. There's no benefit whatsoever to having that discussion. And those kind of ideas kind of do need. So no, I would not platform. I would personally would not, and I don't necessarily think that anybody should platform anyone who's wanting to come on and promote those views. I think the net, should we just say the gain to loss ratio there on this would just say it's not worth platforming those kind of views. However, I also at the same time recognize that there are people that do have bad ideas that can be reasoned out of bad ideas, and myself included. If I was to go back, I'm 40 years old now. If I go back to between the ages of 18 and 20, I do not think any of the three of you would have fucking liked me whatsoever with some of the views that I had. Because I was just fucking ignorant on stuff. I've always, like I said, I always own this stuff because if somebody has a beef for me some days and wants to dig into my past, they can go and do that, because I will own the fact that yes, I in my past used some pretty awful racist, sexist, probably transphobic language at times, and had some awful views. I will own that. I was reasoned gradually out of those positions.
Yeah.
So in that respect, we shouldn't necessarily shy away from the fact that people can be reasoned out of bad positions.
Yeah.
I agree to an extent. I definitely agree that there are certain things that are not worth platforming. However, that doesn't mean that we should allow ourselves to completely forget that they're out there.
Yeah.
The way I say this, like, so for example, you were talking about you wouldn't platform someone who denied a fact of history. Well, there's ways of doing that. Now, I wouldn't necessarily have them on live. What I would say is send me a video with your opinions, and I'd do a rebuttal to it.
Yeah.
And you're entitled to do that. Because A, I wouldn't want that kind of person running their mouth in an uncontrolled environment. And B, things like that are very emotive subjects and they need to be handled delicately. However, if we forget that those arguments are out there, we forget how to contradict them and we forget how to prove them wrong. And that's just as dangerous as anything else. Because once we forget how to argue against them, we lose our ability to fight them.
Yeah.
And
which is why bad ideas have to be challenged.
And I say this as someone who is part Polish, although not something I'm particularly proud of right now after what they did yesterday or the day before. I say this as someone who is mixed race, LGBT, and has learning difficulties. I sat down and worked it out once. There are about 7 or 8 different reasons those people I would have been caught up in all of that, we'll say. That doesn't mean that we should completely eradicate any mention of it ever.
Yeah.
What that means is we have. This is what I meant when I was talking about. I'll put my history lecturer thing on earlier. This is what we mean by learning from history. Learning from history doesn't mean imitating it. Learning from history means criticizing it, assessing it relative to our own modern sensibilities, and applying the lessons in order to progress our own modern sensibilities in the right direction.
Yeah.
What's the old saying? History. Those who those who forget history are doomed to repeat.
Yeah.
Those who know history are doomed to watch everyone else repeat it.
Which is the most often misquoted line right now.
Very, very misquoted.
And in regards to depictions, depictions in media, it's it needs to be addressed when. In my opinion, it doesn't need to be banned or censored. It needs to be addressed. In my opinion, possibly in regards to its impact, the worst book to come out of America was Seduction of the Innocent. For those of you who might not be familiar with the work, it was written by a psychologist in the 1950s about how comic books were causing the deterioration of America's youth and led directly to the Comics Code Authority, which basically tamped down everything.
Frederick Wertham, is that his name?
Yeah.
I remember this guy now. Yeah, I remember this guy.
Yeah, which is why, if you look back at my Twitter history, when the whole violent video game bullshit came up a few months back, I retweeted something like that with the comment, "Thank you, Dr. Wortham." But depictions that are questionable either need to be addressed. They need to if if they're questionable because of, historical context or because of possibly the views of the author, they need to be asterisked. And possibly if it's because they're not
obelisk. Sorry, I couldn't help that one.
Oh no, hieroglyphs need to be obelisk.
These Aussies are crazy.
Yes. But and if it's like something especially egregious, like for instance, particularly graphic violent acts of, either a normal or other nature, then they need to be age restricted.
Hey, Jeff, have you still got that list of banned books in America up?
Give me 2 secs. I probably got the. Give me 2 secs, Hissy.
There's one I want you to search for me. See if it's on there. And Ring will recognise what it is straight away. I don't know if Jen will. You might as well.
I might.
United States. Okay, yeah, give us the name of it, Hissy.
If it's there, it'll be right at the top of the list. It's called 99 Confirmed Kills.
Not on this one.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
I can see, yeah.
Despite the fact that smack in the middle of that book, there is a gory depiction of someone being tortured by having their eyes poked and prodded at. Despite the fact that it quite clearly glorifies violence. It's a book about the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
It's a book about a sniper in the Vietnam War. It's still on the reading list for the US Marines, I think.
Wow.
Or it was
I've never heard
7 years ago when I wrote my dissertation.
Yeah, I've never read that book, so I never even heard of it till you mentioned it, actually. So
it's do you remember the film American Sniper? The guy in Iraq?
Oh, I remember that story. Yeah. Yes,
he broke the Vietnam record that book's based on. For number of people killed.
I again, and I can say allegedly on that because a lot of that book has been kind of exposed to bullshit. So
So I think banned books are all. The problem with banning books is as well it's very, very subjective.
Yeah.
Do we ban a book because the author was problematic? Well, if we do that straight away, we've got no more Disney, no more Grimm's, no more Shakespeare. Anything pre-1200 is gone. No more Chaucer.
Definitely no Harry Potter.
Definitely no Harry Potter.
We'd have to get rid of most scientific journals.
Yeah. Now, do we ban a book because of its content? Well, who decides on what's bannable and what's not?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. And again, I brought this point out earlier that whatever term you want to use, whether you want to use cancel culture, whatever term you want to use on doing this, I think that the best that does is mask the problem. It doesn't address the problem. And that's, I think, the trap I feel we've fallen into as a society too often recently. It
seems to me, but just to tail in, to tag onto that.
Or a bit like addressing the symptoms and not the cause kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that the basic instinct in regards to culture is it makes me feel uncomfortable, so it needs to be put far away from me.
If you're uncomfortable, take another course. One day I'm going to get that on a mug and send it to that teacher.
If you're going to go down the route of you have to burn any document that was written by someone who was problematic by our standards, then you'd have to burn the American Constitution.
Yeah. And the problem is then no text is going to last more than 10 years because I guarantee you the stuff being written now by people who are perfectly fine and in 10 years it's going to be deemed problematic.
Well, heck, I'll leave it to the academics in the panel to correct me. But it seems to me that in in a few years' time, academic reception of Harry Potter will largely probably be seen as problematic because of how Rowling is acting.
It already is.
Yeah, it is, but it shouldn't. That's my problem with that.
Well, you can take the text. What you need, there is very little you need to know. First of all, you do not have to know, guess, or care about the intentions of the creator of a piece of media.
Yeah,
exactly.
What you look
you can
at
take your own thing from it.
Is the material in front of you.
Yeah.
Now, is Harry Potter problematic? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. It's got tropes in there that I didn't even know existed the first time I read it.
It's got a lot of her inner issues written through it.
Yeah. I mean, people are calling out the goblins now, which is great. There's issue. Okay. I don't know how many times I have to say this, or if I've said it on a stream before. The actress for Cursed Child was absolutely amazing. She was brilliant. She was perfectly cast for the role. I have no issue with her whatsoever because Hermione's race was never stated categorically in the text. However, there is no way on this green earth that is recovering because we are all locked indoors and we are the virus that she was a black girl. I know this because if she was, there are certain things she would have done very differently. First of all, she would have not decided that she was the sole voice for house elves. Yeah. She would have spoken to the house elves rather than leaving random stuff to free them and everything else. Now, is the happy slave thing problematic as all hell? Yes. Does that require its own stream all on its own? Yes. But that doesn't give Hermione the right to go in there white knighting it. Yeah. Second of all, Hermione is described routinely as in terms that basically amount to aggressive. So if she's black, that's a hell of a problematic trope because she's, quote, hysterical, shrill. It's not nice.
Physically violent.
Physically violent as well. And she's the only female in the series that's shown that way. Physically violent.
In fact, she's the only wizard that's shown punching someone out.
Exactly. Now, in the book, she slapped him, but even still.
I mean, we covered this in either Harry Potter in part 1 or part 2 of the Harry Potter streams. But Hermione is straight up sadistic.
She is. She's vicious. So that's an issue as well. Then there's also the fact that there are certain things she does that are just, as a black girl looking at this, as a mixed girl, I'm not going to call myself black, the slip of the tongue, my apologies. As someone who's mixed, I looked at it and went, how thick are you? Because it didn't occur to me that anyone would not know when you're on the run, when you need to hide, and all you've got is a camping cooker, a pot, and access to water, that you don't walk into something like a cash and carry or a corner shop or something and buy a cheap bag of rice and feed 3 people for a week. It didn't occur to me that you don't know to do that. A bag of rice and a can of kidney beans. That's a cultural thing. That mixed girls are taught from a young age how to feed people cheaply.
But Scummer?
Yeah, I think ultimately, and it's what my sum up on this is, I said earlier in the stream that I can't tell people who are in minorities or people who've been in the victims of oppression and bigotry how they should feel. I can't do that, and I also understand that completely. If you see pieces of media that are just attacks on yourself, whether it be your race, sex, gender, orientation, whatever it may be, why you don't want to be exposed to that. But and this is just my personal opinion, I feel we've got to be really careful about where. I mean, I don't think there's any set answer to where the line is drawn on this. We have to be careful, because I feel we've fallen into a trap where we are masking. We are trying to cover up. We're trying to cover up the cracks rather than address the actual problem. You know, it's what we're doing. We're trying to mask the problems, and I feel that ultimately is what we. It is not the symptoms; it's the root cause of the issues we need to get to the bottom of and address. And sometimes, and I know that, and I think that can be a very painful process. But ultimately, if we're going to eradicate, bad ideas, ultimately, that's where we need to be getting to. That was just my.
This is the reason for things like the riots at the moment and the worldwide protests and stuff. Is that you get to a point where passive activism can only get you so far if the powers that be aren't listening.
Yeah.
And you end up building up this level of frustration in the people who are being oppressed till they get to the point where it's going to boil over.
Yes.
And we had a mixing pot at the moment. We had the fact that we were getting very close to that, and the fact that people have been locked up for a couple of months. So you get people who are stir crazy, mixed in with all this stuff that's going on, and at the same time, the government doing all this negative stuff, especially in the US, in various states where they're oppressing various people, women, LGBT folk. Even more oppression of blacks. And what happened is the largest of those, well, not the largest because women is the largest, but one of the largest of that group cracked first. And because Black Lives Matter already had the thing, it goes down to that being, it has to go to the streets now. We have to do something about this. What I'm hoping is, whilst the looting that's going on is fucking dreadful, there's no need for that, people. The protests, even getting down to being aggressive, not necessarily violent, but aggressive. You have to prove your point. I hope it doesn't stop at the end of this. I hope it keeps going and we keep pushing for better rights for women, better rights for LGBT people, and better rights for other minorities, because it needs to happen. Because there is this vacuum in our society where we think, just because we might have a few laws that says you can't discriminate doesn't mean that they're actually protecting the people they need to be protecting, because they're not being enforced, and they're also being eroded by fuckwits like Trump and your stupid numpty in the UK.
Yeah, I'll let you finish.
Those lovely Tories.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
On the comment about looting.
Has he gone?
Yeah.
Capitalism does not serve minorities.
Oh, I agree. I 100% agree.
Looting is a perfectly valid form of protest.
Yeah.
Protest will never make the people you're protesting against comfortable. Protesting will never be the right thing to do.
I agree.
Because in any given situation, you're protesting because you have no other option. Therefore, peaceful protest should be a concept that is just... Listen, no one won a war by sitting down and singing Kumbaya, okay? And quite frankly, they've been waging war on minorities for decades, and it's about damn time they got a taste of their own medicine.
100% with you.
And if that gets you cut, I apologize, but I had to say it.
Oh, no. I totally agree with you. If you're in the position, I totally get it. If you have to feed your family, and the only way you can do that during what's going on at the moment, and be especially because we've got these protests at the moment, that's fine.
Jen, let me clarify something. No conditions. When you're fighting a war, you're fighting a war.
I agree.
No condition.
And it is a war.
No,
Don't get it
if you
wrong.
have a moral justification, the moral justification is the fact that we're now fighting back.
Yeah.
That's.
I mean, how is this oppression any different to any other oppression? Sorry, Jeff, you wanted to say something.
I'll just what's happened? Sorry, something happened to my screen here. A second. Okay, got it back. Okay. I was trying to figure out to formulate my thoughts on this. As I said, you probably know that my politics, which I don't get into too often on this, but are more class based than anything else. And I don't know, as I said, I cannot tell someone who's in a racial or gender, any kind of minority in that sense, how they should feel. I've been over this many times. But as I said earlier, that it's all very well for someone like, say, in my position to say, well, yeah, do peaceful protests, do, work within the system. I understand that the appeal to that, but also I understand that it's easy to say work within the system, but you have to understand that the system has failed groups of people entirely. And if that means that ultimately the only way to fight that is to go without that system, or even to call for the overthrow of the system, I don't think it's invalid to say that, because I am a person who personally thinks there is something rotten in the system, in our current order of things. I think there's something inherently rotten. That's my opinion. I think capitalism is a rotten system. It is a filthy system. That's just my opinion. People are free to disagree.
Can I? Because we're on this topic. Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'll let you finish.
Yeah.
No.
Cool.
All these people calling for peaceful protests. Do you know what happens to people who protest peacefully? MLK took a bullet to the head. Colin Kaepernick lost his career.
Gandhi was assassinated. Yeah.
Gandhi was assassinated. Even John Lennon was assassinated.
Yeah.
Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. John Kennedy was assassinated. So clearly, peaceful protest is not the answer. Because peaceful protest isn't working, because all it does is silence people and create martyrs, and martyrs are no good to a cause.
They can be, as long as the cause continues.
I have very mixed views on the peaceful protest. I do not think the go-to thing should be violence at any time. I don't think I think we can all agree on that statement. It's not
this is not a go-to response.
Hold on. Hear me out here, please. Just hear me out on this.
Go for it.
I don't think it's the ultimate. It's never the first to go-to point. However, you've got to understand that if you look historically, when people have fought back against oppression or whatever, they have been met with violence. And I don't think it's necessary. I don't think you can sit there on any kind of real moral high horse, it's too idealistic and utopian to stand there and say that just protest peacefully, you'll get what you get with it. I mean, these are the people who say to me that because of my political views, that I believe in utopian fantasies. And look, I'm sorry, I think sometimes I look at the people who view working within the system as living in a utopian fantasy. Yeah. That's sometimes how I view things.
And No, are you good?
Go on. You finish. You
okay.
No, go on. You go on.
So, this isn't prompted by anything in the chat. This is more a note for whoever might be watching in the future. You may be thinking that this has veered widely off topic, but the thing is, media communicates ideas, and ideas form politics. Ideas are the building blocks of politics. So that's essentially why I let this conversation go as it has been for the few minutes, because at its very core, what we're discussing is problematic depictions in media. And once again, media is how we communicate ideas, through art, through literature, through film, through television, through streams. And ideas are what makes up, our political leanings. And our political leanings is what builds our systems and societies. Does anyone have any closing comments?
I do.
Go on. You first, Jem.
Okay. I want to say to anybody anyone who's white cis het who doesn't understand why you sometimes have to go to that extreme in a protest. Well, it's not even extreme. When the protest has to be physical and sometimes violent. Have you ever been part of a union? Have you ever had to have a picket line? Because it's exactly the same freaking thing. And I'm pretty sure that people in that situation understand what it's like to hold up that placard, to fight for your rights as an employee. That is exactly the same position that black people have been put in, mixed race people have been put in, LGBT people have been put in, women have been put in, and trans people have been put in. That is where we're at now. And it's because we're not being listened to and we're not being supported under the political systems.
I would agree with that with one caveat.
Yep.
We don't get to take the work uniform off at 5 o'clock. This is our lives.
Exactly. Yes. So we're fighting for our lives, not our livelihoods. It's actually more important.
And Hissy, any closing thoughts?
Lots.
You only got
problematic media is problematic. Problematic people are problematic. We need to know that, assess that, and learn from that, not just ignore it. Cancelling people wholesale is not going to work. Even if you don't platform them, you should at the very least be prepared to debunk their ideas. That is the bare minimum you should be doing. You should be showing allyship if you are able to and are in a situation where you feel it warranted and you are safe to do so. I'm not asking anyone to put themselves at risk. I'm not. I would never ask someone to do that. That's a decision for you and your own conscience. But for me, Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter, trans women are women, trans men are men. And if you don't like it, go whistle. And that's my closing statement, because every human being has the right to live their life as they see fit, so long as they are not harming any other human being. And when you are harming us on a systematic level, no matter who we are, we have the right and the duty to fight back. And that's what's happening in the world now. And when we look at these things in media, no one, when you read the Mockingjay series, no one's siding with the Capitol. No one read Harry Potter and sided with the Death Eaters. That's what these stories give us. They show us. Now, if you are wondering, a lot of people, it used to be a thing people used to say, well, I would have been different. I'd have hidden Anne Frank. I'd have stood up and been counted, and I'd have told them where to go. Look at what you're doing right now. That's what you would have done then. Act accordingly. That's it. That's my statement. That's my soapbox.
Yeah. And Scummer?
Okay. I'm just looking for it. I suppose to sum up, yeah, as I was saying a minute ago, that it's very easy for someone to me to say, work within the system, fight within the system. Now, there are times when that's applicable. There's times when you're like, yeah, I don't think every situation calls for a revolutionary or extremist kind of answer. But when there's something fundamentally wrong with the system, you can't stand there and argue that people are wrong to step out of that system. And you have to understand that the media is part of that system. And I don't want to come off as kind of like conspiracy theorist rhetoric when I talk about a great big system. I hope people understand that's not what I'm coming across as. I have my own views. As people know, I have a very disdainful view as capitalism as a system. I think it is a filthy system. That is my own personal politics. And again, I said earlier that when it comes to things within our existing media, we have a tendency to try and cover up the cracks rather than actually address the actual problems, which is what we need to do. I just like to. I feel like I've been a bit incoherent here, and I've gone off on numerous different tangents. But I am. This stream's kind of got to me in the topics. I want to read something here, which is a poem that's in the middle of this book, which is a political manifesto. This is the Services to the People's program by the Black Panther Party in the 1960s and so on, which is one of my most valued possessions. This was signed by David Hilliard, who was, whilst Huey Newton was in jail, David Hilliard actually was the leader of the Black Panther Party for the time. But there was a poem written in this called A Very Black Man, and I don't even know if it's applicable, but it's just a little bit moving to me. Just look at a man, if you ever can. Simply see his face, see his very black face, with no trace of disgrace, with more than a hint of pride. And he feels like a man, a very good man, as he places his hand in mine. Yes, a very black hand that he held in my own and led me back home on my own. And I'd cry with the man, and I'd die with the man. I'd lie with the man, because I know that I am the woman. I am just a very black man. It's just, I don't know why, it's just moving little bit of poetry. I don't even know how it relates, but I've just got a bit moved by this whole thing, and I'm just gonna shut up now because I've got a bit moved by this whole thing, and I've got a bit upset, and I don't think I'm being coherent at this point.
It's okay, Jeff.
So I'm gonna go off stream for a sec.
Okay,
Jeff. Okay. Before you do, thank you for reading that. It's entirely the point that's been made. People deserve to live their lives. And in situations where someone is telling you that you do not have the right to live your life, I will always stand with you. I will kill and die for your right to live free from fear and tyranny. Because at the end of the day, that right is not something that anyone should be able to take away from you.
Exactly.
And if you think something like the colour of someone's skin or their genitals or their accent or how much money they have in the bank makes them more or less worthy of that fundamental right, there is something fundamentally wrong with you.
Thanks for the kind words there, Hissy, because I felt like I was just going off on a ramble at the end, but I got to admit I got a little emotional at the end, and
so did I.
I don't think I was making that much sense, you know.
You were actually, Jeff.
But yeah, I'll be back in 2 minutes, okay, guys. If you want to sign off, I just
So, in my closing statement, I'm just going to reiterate. People might think that the tail end of the stream has veered too much into the political, and the thing is, you might not see the connection, but it's very much connected. Because once again, media is how we communicate ideas. Ideas are the building blocks of our politics and our society. And I'm not gonna shield myself this time. If you're watching, you know what I do. I'm probably not going to be making edited videos in the near future because of just how my work schedule is. So you know what I do. I'm going to keep doing it. But if you have disposable income, and then maybe donate some of it to bailout projects, to Black Lives Matter, to help how you can. That is my shilling.
Yeah, I'll go with that. The NAACP, the bailout funds, the George Floyd Memorial funds, they're all taking donations. You can find them very easily just by Googling it. You can literally Google Black Lives Matter donations and you'll get so many hits.
Yeah.
There's a card going around on Twitter with all the links on it, which I'm sure you've seen more than once. I'll send Ring the link so we can put it in the description of below. Also, I know right now Black Lives, yes, that's the big issue. But 2 days ago, Poland declared LGBT folks state enemies. Yep. It's now illegal to be LGBT in Poland.
And the Trump administration removed protections from for LGBT people and for some women as well, in medical terms and a few other things. And then, of course, today,
in the UK, they're talking about now they're going to be rolling back and making it harder for transgender people to transition. Yes, Black Lives Matter. Yes, trans lives matter. These are the people who are the most oppressed in our societies. There is intersectionality here. When you stand with Black Lives Matter, you should be standing with trans people as well, LGBT people as well, women as well. We all stand together in this. That's the only way we move forward. If you've got the disposable income, Black Lives Matter right now is the priority, but I'm sure there are plenty of other charities for plenty of other minority groups who would very much appreciate your help and support as well.
Yeah. If you're wanting to help any trans groups, the only one I can think of off the top of my head is Mermaids in the UK. But if you go to Mermaids' website, they actually have links to other support groups around the world for trans and other LGBT groups. So you can go there if you want to offer support in your local areas for LGBT people.
But
it's the same for any minorities. If you see someone being oppressed, stand up for them if you can, if it's safe for you. And give your support to people, but don't talk over them.
Yeah.
Lift them up. Don't drown them out.
We know you've all got used to me saying now, I always end streams with take care, be good, and if you can't be good, be careful. Because sometimes you can't be good, but please take care of yourselves as best you can. And remember, as much as this fight is going on now, we still need to be here to rebuild after it. So take care as best you can. And really,
this fight's going to go a while because there is so much we have to change and get better in society.
This is not going to go away.
This is not going away now.
And even if you can't afford to donate with money, because I know a lot of people will be in that position, there are other things you can do. Get on social media, talk, join live streams, get into live chats, get the message out there. Your value is not just in how much money you can throw into the pot. You know, you can, if you get into crafts, or if you're into making online pictures, start making memes, start knitting for the poor, start, you know, doing artwork. Whatever you can do, doesn't have to be money, but all of us now are in this together, and we all have to bring our A game and bring what we can to make something better out of this.
Yes.
I'm not going to shill either. You know who I am.
I'm not shilling.
And I think Jeff said he wasn't, although I will say Jeff has been, and I don't know if he can hear me, Jeff has been brilliant on this stream. Ring has as well. I know Jen and I have dominated the stream a little bit because we're both from various minorities and it's personal.
Well, at least the end of the stream we have.
Yeah. But it's nice to actually have been invited somewhere where we've been granted that platform where we can talk in an environment. But everyone in the chat and all the people watching in future, you're all amazing. Please do not lose the momentum. Keep fighting. That's all we have to do now. We keep fighting.
Can I just say I was listening in to, and thank you for the very kind words you just said back to me, Hissy. So I was a bit emotional because even to me as someone, it's a white cis male, okay, and I accept that, even though I'm not working class, there's an element of privilege to me in a sense that, I'm not necessarily, if I'm, the way, say, I'm treated by the police or whatever may be different to very different to, say, a black person in my same social situation. My closing words would be this, and I'm still very emotional. I'm not necessarily making the most rational argument. I'm making an emotional argument on this. We need, whatever way it is, we need to get better as a society on so much. And I like to think we can do better than what we're doing right now. I want to believe that. Whether that is change through reform or revolutionary means, I don't know. But we need to get better. I feel, as people, and I like to think we can do better. And I'll shut up now.
I think you can sign out now, Ring.
Yeah. We're all emotional, so we're not going to feel like we've finished talking even when we have, but I think this is the point to say.
I'm sure we'll be talking off stream in a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, and given how serious this topic has been, I'm not going to sign off with the portmanteau of our tagline.
Please don't.
Though, given, I will say that, my regular tagline, indoctrination is a hell of a drug. But, and once again, I'll just, to end this, I will reiterate, media is how we communicate ideas. Ideas build our politics and our society. And just, remind, do what you can. And
That's the best sign off you can have is do what you can.
Yeah, just do what you can.